Did you know that cannabis is legal in the state of Missouri recreationally? Did you know that cannabis is recreationally legal in Canada? And other than really cold, reportedly crappy winters, I think that's where the similarities between Missouri and Canada cease. My name is Clover, and this is the Love It or Leave It podcast. I'm so glad you're here. If you came over from our previous podcast, the Disney Rabbit Hole, welcome. If you're here from our other YouTube channel, Cloverloop, get bent. I'm just kidding. Welcome. And if you're new, awesome. I'm so glad you're here. I got my recreational cannabis. I got my jar of Pinot Noir. Let's get into it. In this podcast, my partner Lori and I are going to share the realities of what it is like to emigrate from the U.S. to Canada, specifically from St. Louis, Missouri to Toronto, Ontario. If you're an American, have you ever thought to yourself, screw it, I'm moving to Canada? Or as a Canadian, have you ever thought to yourself, forget it, I'm getting out of here, I'm moving to America? I don't know if the latter ever happens, but the former does all the time. Increasingly since I would say George II was president. But ever since Trump's first term, and even before that, the overturning of Roe v. Wade via an opinion by the Supreme Court, talk of getting the F out of Dodge has certainly picked up in popularity, definitely among the queer and trans crowd. I am a queer person, and my whole damn family is queer. I'm non-binary myself, my partner is queer, and my kiddo is trans. 7 or 8 years ago, we moved from Southern California to St. Louis, Missouri for the reasons that people make that kind of a move. We wanted to be closer to family and we wanted to be closer to friends. And the cost of living in St. Louis, Missouri was nothing compared to the cost of living in Southern California. And when I first moved to Missouri, I experienced culture shock for real. It was so different to come back to the Midwest. Yes, I was originally raised here. I lived in Kansas City. Attended college in Columbia, Missouri at the University of Missouri, and then moved to Southern California where I lived for 15 years quite happily and assumed that I would probably just live there for the rest of my life. But life had other plans for us and we had a kiddo and it was really expensive and we were hustling so hard and didn't feel like we were saving anything or making much progress. And one day we looked at each other and just said, is this worth it? Okay, really, it was mainly me. I was really lonely because I was a stay-at-home parent and I felt like I didn't have any peers, and that is a whole other story. But the point is, Southern California stopped being right for us, and St. Louis, Missouri did have a certain appeal. And we knew that we were backtracking culturally, moving from a very progressive place to a not very progressive place. The last few years has seen an avalanche of anti-trans legislation introduced and a really frightening amount of it getting passed. My understanding is that most of it is crap legislation with no clear way to enforce in a lot of scenarios. But rationalizing does not excuse, and I am not making an excuse for any of this because there has been a rising tide, no doubt. And the simple introduction of these bills and all of the press that it causes does a lot of damage on its own. When we saw the results of the 2024 presidential election here in the U.S., we really knew that we couldn't stick around. We talked about going to other places. Portland was on the table. We talked about Massachusetts, Vermont, because we really like ice cream and human rights. At one point, we even went back to Southern California and shopped around for places to live. But with each passing day since these fart knockers took office, it has become increasingly clear that we do not belong here. We are not wanted here. We're really not safe here, and we should leave here. Here being the U.S., and these other cities/states are really nice and lovely places to live, probably. I know that there are some places in the United States that are dedicated to taking care of their own citizens. That's refreshing to know, and certainly we even take advantage of that. The bad guys have made it economically impossible for hospitals to offer trans-affirming care here in Missouri. When these shitheads realized that the public would never vote to pass something so evil, they stroke their triangle-shaped beards and just pass a decree. And that's just what happened here in Missouri. Moments after the Supreme Court handed down the Roe v. Wade opinion, Missouri was the fastest to pass a near total abortion ban. So fast that they almost got ban burn. And really all of these things that I'm talking about were manageable. Shitty but tolerable because I'm a grown-up and I tend not to engage with this kind of shit that I can't control. Does it upset me? Yeah, it definitely upsets me. But then last July, our kiddo came out as trans, and all of a sudden these stupid laws weren't just affecting me and my partner, they were affecting our kiddo. And that pushed it over the line from this is stupid to this is untenable. While I do believe that there are plenty of states and cities in the U.S. that are going to provide refuge and protection for trans and queer people, I also believe that those of us that have the means to leave this country are better served to do so. In other words, if you can, get the fuck out of here. And where should you go? There's tons of places in the world that would love to have lots of different people. You can do your own research online. I will tell you that most of them are probably going to be kind of expensive, and an international relocation isn't just a move across town. I mean, there's a lot that goes along with that. Not just red tape and paperwork, but cultural stuff and culture shock. Leaving our current lives behind, all of our friends, everyone who's been so supportive of us, and moving to a new country that we really don't know that much about is pretty scary. It's exciting, but it's scary. We chose Canada for 3 big reasons. 1, they speak English and we speak English. Next, it's a similar time zone. We're in Central Time here in St. Louis, Missouri, and Toronto is on Eastern Time. And the last reason is because they had this immigration program that probably was going to work for us when we looked into it. And now we know, yes, it is. That was the program for us. And that has to do specifically with business immigration and work visas. And that's why being on Eastern Time is actually a little better, because the company that we are moving to Canada does business with a lot of people on the East Coast of the US. Culturally, I don't expect it to be identical. I think that there is a misconception by Americans, but not by Canadians, of how different Americans and Canadians actually are. There are here and there differences like Starbucks and Tim Hortons, or imperial weights and measures and the metric system, Fahrenheit, Celsius, and the differences really go on and on. I've been studying up watching Letterkenny to learn the intricacies. Sort of kidding, but also not. I can confidently say that there is no possible way that I can relate to what kids go through when they have to walk through the doors of their school every day. And I gotta think that if you're a kid, if you're at school and you feel threatened by what's around you, maybe because you're neurodivergent and this system just doesn't work for you, maybe it's bullies, maybe it's because you're a queer kid and you don't have enough allies, or maybe it's because you're a trans kid and middle schoolers are just awful. Our kiddo just stopped wanting to go to school. This is public school in St. Louis. I do actually have a lot of really nice things to say about the schools here. Diversity and representation are not really among the nice things that I would say, but there are a lot of good, nice people who seem to really want to help. But wanting to help and being able to help are 2 really different things, and it seemed like people knew the right things to say, but perhaps when they tried to act on the impulses that they had, they would run into barriers set up by a system not really catered to individual students. But imagine being a trans kid and none of the adults around you can honestly give you the reassurance that you can go into this space and be protected from this hurtful language. And there was really no amount of characterization that I could do for my kiddo where I could confidently say, I want you to go to this place because I think you're going to be safe there and it's going to nurture you, and I think that's what's best. And ultimately, I realized that there just was no school here that was going to work for her or for our family. Where we are right now is just kind of like filling in a stopgap measure homeschooling between now and when we enroll our kiddo in school in Canada, if that becomes a viable thing for her, or perhaps we explore something else. Look, I don't know. I feel a little more under control than I did before I started talking, although this thing is cached and this thing is lower. I think that's a good place to wrap it up because clearly I need some self-care time. My nails are a mess. Things are happening pretty quickly over here. We applied for temporary work visa officially, and not very long from now, Lori will head right to the border to submit this paperwork. We're in the process of selling our house, and if you're watching this thinking like, oh my God, these people are crazy, what's crazier? A nincompoop in the White House or moving to Canada? See you next time, y'all.